Time now for Inside Utah Politics with Lindsay Aerts.
Well, welcome in. I am Lindsay Aerts. Let's go inside Utah politics as we kick off the program today. We're just about a week out from the general session of the Utah legislature. Already, we're seeing a proposal to see the state cut the income tax for a 6th year in a row. But that could be a tall order in a tight budget year. To look ahead at the session, I'm joined by Senator Dan McCay. He proposed that tax cut. Senator McCay, welcome back.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here. Okay, so the income tax proposal at this juncture is just reducing it by 0.05%. So taking that rate down just a little bit, both for corporations and for individuals, right?
Yeah.
I sort of know how these tax proposals work, covering the legislature for the handful of years that I have. And so it's sort of like we throw a number at the wall, that gets debated. We see better numbers in February. Is it too early to talk about income tax? But I mean, talk to me about why you want this cut.
Well, I was talking to my colleagues about this the other day. We have looked at ways to continue to stay competitive as a state, to attract talent, to attract, people, to attract really the best business environment and the best environment for families. And when you look at that, you look at the income tax. I've never liked the income tax because it is the most difficult tax to administer. One, it's the least transparent, and two, at the same time, it is a double taxation, which, you tax income, and then every tax you pay after that is added tax on top of it, so it's double taxed. And so I've tried to minimize income tax and tried to make the other taxes transparent so that at the end of the day, people have a good idea of what to rely on. And I think in this environment that we go into, we're already seeing, numbers coming out of the federal government that they're looking at better than they were expecting performance, a lower trade imbalance, which is then boosting the economy. And so I think we're going to see numbers in February that are better and will provide an environment for us to potentially look at the income tax cut.
Okay, but what if we don't? If the numbers were just as the governor's Office of Economic Budget is predicting them right now, could we still cut income tax?
Well, if you ask me, I would love to find ways to reduce the expenditures so at the same time we can then provide tax relief to our citizens. How to do that and the best ways to do that, that's a great conversation for February as we fight through trying to find the right places to target and cut.
Yeah, something has to give, right? Because there's always a socks and underwear budget.
Well, and we always have demand for the budget, right? There's always some new expenses. So even when it's a tight year, that means when it's a tight year, that means it's not easy to find new revenue. So we then have to go into the closet and figure out what we're going to eliminate so that we can then come forward and pay for these new expenses.
Right. And whenever we cut the income tax, I think about that it funds education, right? And so the lower we go and go and go, we've cut income taxes for the last 5 years in a row. We have fewer funds for our public and higher education systems. How do we make up that money?
We get a lot of feedback from constituents. They want to see, teachers paid. But the interesting component to that is we are now creeping up as a percentage of, the state and percentage of students. We're now creeping up on higher teacher salaries such that retention is not as hard as it once was. We don't have the same teacher shortage we were talking about 5, 6, 7 years ago. And so I did just say 6, 7. But the idea, it's for my kid. But you're looking at some of those things being easier to do, and we're trying to make sure that we're right sizing all of that, bringing all of that, teacher pay and public employee pay all into the right perspective to meet the market. And I think those are attractive conversations to have as well. We already have a statutory obligation to meet, our funding requirements for growth and those kinds of things. And I think we'll be having those conversations as well. I just think, if you look at the totality of things, growth and cost of living increases are already built into the budget when we're saying it's a tight year.
Yeah, I don't purport to be a tax policy expert, but I don't feel like I really got a solid, where does this pot of money come from? Because I understand that our income tax is kind of outpacing our sales tax right now, and we have sort of these 3 buckets of our state budget.
Well, not only that, but income tax is also the most volatile. So we see the most variability in collections in income tax as opposed to property tax or sales tax or the excise tax. All of those are very flat and performing along with the rest of the state, but income is just so variable since COVID. And And that's one of the reasons we want to reduce our dependence on the income tax, is that variability.
Right, but how do you make up that money? Where does it come from?
Well,
property taxes or sales taxes?
We've seen growth in all of our revenue sources over the last 10 years. And so trying to figure out the best places to make sure that we're spending that money in ways that we can offset income tax losses, I feel like is an important thing. But I think you also have to look at property tax. People are frustrated about property tax, and you can't ignore the fact that property tax has its own issues. And if anybody is still awake while we're talking about taxes, I totally appreciate it.
Hey, we did 6-7.
We did.
I mean, that's
but trying to find the right balance so that people feel like, you know, their taxing entities are meeting their needs. You know, this year we're looking at a cap on property tax such that property tax increases won't be as dramatic. We're not talking about 20-30% increases that we've been talking about for years. We're capping them at potentially 5% or maybe even lower, is what some of my colleagues would like to see. And so trying to do that, and also trying to provide additional transparency into property tax tools, I feel like those things are just as important, so that we make sure, again, people love predictability. They don't like to get notices that their property taxes are increasing. They don't like to see their income tax increasing. And that predictability breeds profitability, and it also breeds like job growth and income growth in the state. And in a lot of ways, that rising tide floats all boats and improves everybody's.
Okay, I want to drill down on that property tax policy just a little bit. Is this another example of the state being heavy-handed with cities when they purport to like local control, but then, you know, you're limiting how much the city can raise its property taxes?
Well, what we found is that in the past, you know, entities, cities, school districts, everybody else, they'll raise a property tax to pay for a capital project. Okay, and then when that capital project is paid for, they don't go and cut their rate based on, you know, having now paid for that item, whatever the capital project is, new building, whatever it is. They leave it in, and then they grow government to fill that space. And so what we're trying to figure out is, can we move capital projects to bonding? And do it appropriately through bonding so that that rate expires when the project is built, and then make sure that cost of living and other parts go along with it. There is no reason for government to grow faster than the cost of living. There just isn't.
But why isn't that county or that city or that taxing entity the best one to make that decision?
Oh, they'll still be able to make those decisions. That won't be, we aren't locking anybody out of the decision.
But capped at 5%.
Right, but again, 5% is not the cost of living. If you know, other than during COVID where we saw 5-6% of cost of living is much lower, right? If we were to do it right now at the Fed, we're talking about 2.4, 2.6 maybe. And so we take those rates down there. We've still given them a lot of flexibility to stay on cost of living and be able to provide for new services if they need to, but they just need to take it to their taxpayers to tell them what they're doing.
In our last 90 seconds, I'm going to take a left turn to talk about campaigning because your race in your Senate district is one of the most talked about this legislative session. You are running for re-election, but you have a formidable challenger in Representative Doug Fiafia, who's filed to run for your office. What do you make of him coming to challenge you, and how do you plan to hold on to your seat?
Well, you know, I've run a lot of campaigns. I've won all of them thus far. I feel very grateful for having that experience. It's the people's decision. This is not my seat. It doesn't belong to me. I do feel like I'm doing my job, and if the people agree with me, they'll reelect me. And if they don't, my goodness, I will find other things to do, just like they do when they change jobs or retire or whatever it may be.
I know you're a big golfer.
I do. Well, is that a fat joke, Lindsay?
No. I'm just saying you have other things that you like to do.
So I just say that, you know, campaigns are always interesting. They're always binary, and so people have to make a choice. I feel like my record will stand where it is, and if people like it, great. And if they don't, they'll find someone else, and it'll be just fine.
Do you feel like you've had a challenger like Fiafia before, someone this?
Oh, I've run against incumbent lawmakers before, and I've run, you know, when I first ran for the Senate, I ran against two very strong, you know, people that were running against me for office, and those two put on great campaigns, and I still found a way to win, quite convincingly, actually. But that being said, I still think if people look at the process of elections, I still think that the voters like that opportunity to make the decision, and we'll give them that opportunity. And I think in a lot of ways, people have to decide, you know, what happens when people run against each other from the House versus the Senate. It'll be interesting.
We will have to leave it there.
I will say it's never worked out for the House member before.
Okay, some fighting words there. Senator Dan McCay, thanks for your time today. Appreciate it. All right, still ahead on Inside Utah Politics, the governor endorses a bell-to-bell cell phone ban in Utah schools. What that policy could look like in action. Coming up.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics with Lindsay Aerts.
Well, welcome back. Kids will no longer be able to use their cell phones in schools during the school day if Governor Cox and some state lawmakers get their way. They're pushing this policy, this legislative session. Now, the bill does have some exceptions for when cell phones would be allowed and still allows local school districts to create more. So joining me to break down the plans, the president of the policy project, Emily Bell McCormick, their local advocacy group who are backing this policy. Hi, Emily.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you for being here. Okay, so banning cell phones in schools, it's something that you didn't really think you'd see from a Republican administration.
Right, especially a year ago we worked, and this has kind of been, building slowly. Last year we got cell phones out of the classroom. But it was a discussion in the beginning. The original bill was a bell to bell, meaning first bell of the day to the last bell in the afternoon. Like, you're not using it in the classroom, but you're also not using it in the halls or in the lunchroom. And that died last year, right? We removed that and it became a classroom only ban. And so now we're looking at opening that up again and really looking at the entire day for kids.
It's likely you have the votes for this to pass. The governor's on his bully pulpit, really making it one of his priorities. But I think the biggest consternation I hear from parents is, what if there's a school shooting?
Yeah.
What if there's something that tragic and I need to reach my kid? Now, I recognize that the bill has carve-outs for if there's a school emergency, but sort of the argument is, well, they can't get to their phone because it's locked in their locker or something like that. How would I know if my child's okay?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely the biggest fear, because we live in a time where these threats are actually real. I'd love to think 15 years ago we would have said that doesn't really happen, but it actually happens. And so I think that is the thing that we hear most often. And you're right, there is a carve out in the bill that says if there's any kind of imminent threat or emergency, that they can access their phone. Now, yes, their phone might be in their locker or in their backpack, which typically a lot of kids have those with them. That said, one thing we do know is that any law enforcement officials have said the safest thing to do in case of an emergency is to be able to pay attention to one person who's kind of leading you through that process. So heaven forbid anything ever happens in our schools, but we know that these things really do happen. And the best thing is for our students to pay attention to the leader of that class and do what they say.
So you think not having a cell phone on you means in the event of an emergency, kids will be paying attention to the very vital instructions that they would need to get out safely?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, that's the hope, right? Is that their attention is able to be directed to one person who has gone through these safety protocols and knows what should happen.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I want to point out the other carve-outs because I think these are important. If you have an individualized education plan, an IEP or a 504, which comes from the federal government, right, tells you, your student has unique needs. If they have diabetes and they manage their blood sugar on their phone, there's carve-outs for that. Are there any other important carve-outs that you think parents need to know about?
Yeah, those are the main ones. I think I think the benefits of not having cell phones in school has been proven over and over again. We're 10 years into this gig. These smartphones were around about a decade ago. We should have done something then. None of us really knew what we were giving our kids. And so what we're trying to do is create a space where there are carve-outs, there are exceptions for kids that are in exceptional positions, but not for the bulk of kids. Because what we see is the socialization that can happen when kids don't have their cell phones, right? And the attention that they can pay to the teacher. These kids are getting 237 notifications on their phone per day on average. I mean, you think of how much that is beeping and yelling at them to pay attention. And what we want to say is, let us as the adults remove that that kind of burden and stress from you during the day so that you can be fully present. Because I think what the adults have is we had a period in our time where we where we learned that in certain situations we should not have a cell phone. It would be inappropriate for me to be scrolling right now as we're chatting, right?
Well, yeah. I often have to listen and talk at the same time.
Exactly, but it is a trait held for very few talented people like you, Lindsay.
Skilled, yes.
But I think it's giving kids that opportunity to know, like, some places this is appropriate and other places, like school, like work, like these other things you're going to do in adulthood, it's not appropriate.
Some school districts like Granite have already implemented this bell-to-bell rule, and they've been practicing this for the last year. They say it's going really well. They say like fights are down, right?
Yeah.
Fewer fights. Kids are just less distracted. Are those some of the benefits you're seeing?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and some funny things. Like, we did not think this would impact attendance, and if it did, that it would be in a negative way. Like, well, kids just aren't even going to go to school. For some reason, attendance is going up. You're right. Like, the incidents of fighting and stuff is going way down. But the other thing that's been really cool to watch is that failures have decreased. So just even in the first semester of this, we've seen failures decrease. We've had individual teachers say, you know, I had always a third of my class that was in like the DF range, and now no one is in the DF range. I mean, I just think as we kind of transition this, it's going to be incredible to see what our kids can do. Also, just want to note that a lot of this we put on kids, like, oh my gosh, our kids are so bad, they want to scroll all the time, they're so lazy. This is not just a kid problem. I mean, it's an adult problem. Like, we created this because we allowed this. In addition, I think that there has been some interesting stuff that has happened with teaching. If you don't have a full hour lesson plan, sometimes that will be cut short because there is a safety of, like, my kids can scroll when they're done.
Do you love those gut checks from your kids when they're like, Mom, you're not even looking at me. You're looking at your phone.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I get that all the time.
Okay, so the one or the other, just kind of like on principle, I haven't heard a lot of pushback, I'll be frank, to this policy.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of people are on board with it. But just from a principle perspective, there are some people who feel like the government should not be making this decision, right? It is my right as a parent to give my kid a cell phone, and I want them to have it. And you, government, don't get to say what I do with my kids in school. What do you want to say to that?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective and something that we definitely heard about last year. Have not heard that pushback this year, because I think that there is a growing awareness that, like, it is also my right as a parent to hand my kid, you know, an explicit magazine. But we all know that, like, you can't take that into class. Like, that is not okay. It's not appropriate. It's not where it belongs. We're not going to, you know, back in the day when there were the little portable DVD players, we're not sending with our kids to class with one of those. That would be so weird and inappropriate. And I think that there is a growing acknowledgement that a phone is both of those things and so much more. It is distracting to the nth degree. Yeah.
We have about 2 minutes left, but I want to hit on some of the other policies you're working on this session, because you guys are a formidable policy group on Capitol Hill, and you have the ear of lawmakers. So what else are you trying to get done?
So we're super excited. Our main focus this year is actually on supporting young families in the state of Utah. And what that looks like is a myriad of things. So we're taking this approach where we're thinking of, you know, what does a young family look like? It looks like, you know, in some situations we need increased childcare and access to safe childcare. In some cases, we need a little bit more flexibility for parents who want to be in the home and raise their kids at home. Like, what does that look like from 0 to 4? And in some cases, it's things like maternity leave, expanding that so that moms can be with their children for a little bit longer, up to 12 weeks. So we're looking at a series of policies that create grants to create like at-home childcare facilities. It increases the child tax credit, like the range of people who can receive that child tax credit, which then adds a little bit of flexibility for them, and some other really cool policies that really do impact young families.
Tell me about the one involving small businesses, because I find this so unique, because obviously we're set up in a system in the United States where it's optional for businesses to offer childcare. Not many do. In fact, very few do, right? So what does that look like?
Oh, this is super cool, because I think it has been a lifelong struggle to get businesses to get into the childcare conversation. And there is now a cool opportunity with this. HR 1, or the big beautiful bill, did a little bit to expand some benefits, some tax credits for businesses who offer childcare to their employees. And so what we want to do here, we're doing this with Representative Thompson and Senator Baldery, is we want to expand that, add on to that, where small businesses in the state of Utah, if they allow or if they offer a benefit to their employees, the government will give back or credit their taxes up to 80% of what they give their employees. So it is a huge tax credit for small businesses.
Yeah.
It's going to make a big difference, and I think actually incentivize them to do that, to offer. They don't need to have the child care facility on site. They can just use an approved provider.
Will that happen almost immediately? Can you get those child care providers on board that quickly?
Yeah, we're having those conversations now and have been having them for the past 6 months.
Yeah.
And so the hope is, by this summer, when funding kind of becomes concrete, like in July, we hope to have that up and running so that small businesses can just start signing up.
Emily Bell McCormick with the Policy Project. Thanks for bringing us all your ideas today, and they're talkers here in Utah. So see you populating my show.
Hey, thanks, Lindsay.
Okay, good to see you.
You too.
All right, when we come back, a bipartisan push to rein in military action in Venezuela. We have a reaction from Capitol Hill as the War Powers Resolution moves on despite the president's wishes. Stay with us. Congressional Democrats are working to limit the Trump administration's ability to conduct further strikes in Venezuela. Some Senate Republicans siding with them, advancing a resolution that would require congressional approval ahead of any new strikes. Washington correspondent Gabrielle Caracciolo reports.
The yeas are 52, the nays are 47. The motion is agreed to.
A key procedural vote moves the War Powers Resolution forward in the Senate. Next week, they'll debate whether the president needs congressional approval to take further action against Venezuela.
I've been trying to do this since September to get the Senate to take seriously the issue that we shouldn't send our sons and daughters into war without consultation, debate, and vote in Congress.
The issue of war and peace, that is important. And every member of Congress, ought to go on record.
This was the first vote on the matter since the capture of Nicolas Maduro. A handful of Republicans sided with Democrats, allowing it to advance.
I think the vote today reflects that more Republicans are taking it seriously because it's no longer hypothetical but real. There are some real questions that will go on that Congress needs to be involved.
But most Republicans argued the resolution is not necessary.
This is not a war. This was a law enforcement operation.
You're trying to stop something that isn't going on. What this was is a slap in the face to the president.
If the votes stay the same, the War Powers Resolution could now pass the Senate, but it still faces an uphill battle in the House. And the White House says if it passes there, the president will veto it. In Washington, I'm Gabrielle Caracciolo.
Well, Utah has become the state with the most banned books this week after banning 3 more from public schools, bringing the total to 22. And with that, the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU of Utah, filing a lawsuit against the state, saying this book ban violates authors and students' First Amendment rights. Arcade Garner has more.
That lawsuit is 60 pages long, and an attorney for ACLU tells me that it's about taking power away from lawmakers and giving it back to educators and parents in terms of what books students have access to at school. This is that lawsuit. On page 3, it says it's being brought forward to challenge portions of the Utah Sensitive Materials Law that, quote, function as a modern-day book burning.
Utah's Sensitive Materials Law is one of the most extreme book removal laws in the country. It's resulted in hundreds of books being removed from school library shelves.
This is Tom Ford, an attorney for ACLU of Utah.
Proponents behind this law and the people who've sponsored it intend to continue censoring books, and they intend to continue removing constitutionally protected materials from Utah's school.
The law was originally passed in 2022. In 2023, it led to the Bible being removed from one school district. The law was then revised in 2024. Basically, it tries to limit or ban pornographic and indecent materials from public schools. And if 3 or more districts ban the same book, it's then banned statewide. Just this week, 3 books made the list: Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and 19 Minutes. Tom Ford says this is just another example of the legislature having too much power.
These students are denied access to really important ideas, information, and lived experiences. Many of them see themselves in these books.
And rather, he says, it should be the educators who decide what's appropriate for a library's collection.
They're one of the only forums that allows for self-directed learning, places where students can go and explore areas of information that aren't covered in the classroom or by the prescribed curriculum.
And parents, what's appropriate for their children.
And this lawsuit seeks to protect parental rights. It seeks to ensure that other parents aren't making decisions about what's right for your child.
We've reached out to the state legislature, to the Attorney General's office, as well as the Utah State Board of Education for comment, as they are all listed as defendants in this lawsuit, none of which can give us a statement at this time. Reporting from the newsroom, Cade Garner, ABC4 News.
Kate, thanks for that breakdown. Well, that does it for today's Inside Utah Politics. Stay in touch with us on social media, won't you? You can find me on X, Threads, and Instagram. Just search for Lindsay on Air. Lindsay spelled with an A, by the way. You can also find Inside Utah Politics in podcast form wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're looking for more national political coverage, check out our Political Power Ranker. Our next, our national political director and the head of Emerson College Polling look at who's up and who's down in the world of politics based on the data. Now, we carry that for you and more analysis from Utah on our free streaming app. It's called News for Utah Plus. You can download that on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV. Well, thanks for joining us this week. We will see you next week.